Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some warnings are only understood once it's already over. Deep within a decommissioned Cold War listening post, a single magnetic tape reel was recently discovered, logged under the designation Echo7 Zulu. For over half a century, its contents were classified, its existence known only to a select few. This is not just the story of a forgotten recording. It is the chronicle of a message that traveled through time and space, only to arrive in a world that was no longer listening. Tonight, we unseal the forgotten file of the message that arrived too late. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Narrator. In the vast, sterile archives of decommissioned government projects, most files are mundane. Budget reports, supply chain logistics, personnel transfers. They are the skeletal remains of bureaucracy, picked clean of any real meaning. But sometimes, buried in the digital deluge of declassification, a file surfaces that doesn't belong, a file that feels active. It hums with a silent, cold energy. Our story begins with one such file, a ghost in the machine. Its designation, Echo7 Zulu. Narrator. Echo7. Zulu was not meant to be found. It was part of a data transfer error. A digital ghost accidentally materialized from a server farm slated for physical destruction. It contains no executive summary, no table of contents. It is a chaotic mosaic of teletype transcripts, seismic readings, garbled audio logs, and satellite imagery so grainy it looks like abstract art. The document is a scar, the official record of an event that was meticulously erased from history. It details the final 72 hours of a remote monitoring station, a place that, according to public record, never existed. The year was 1973. The Cold War was a silent global chess match played in the shadows. Both superpowers were listening, not just to each other, but to the sky, to the deep oceans, and to the frozen, empty places of the world. They were searching for an advantage, a weakness, a sign. What they found, what Echo7 Zulu documents, was something else entirely. The file speaks of a persistent, narrow-band signal of unknown origin. It wasn't the chaotic hiss of the cosmos, nor was it the clumsy signature of human technology. It was structured, complex, and impossibly old. It was a message. But the file makes one thing terrifyingly clear. By the time they understood what it was saying, it was already too late. Narrator. Every ghost has a voice. The voice behind Echo7 Zulu belonged to Dr. Alistair Finch. A brilliant but difficult astrophysicist, Finch was relegated to a forgotten corner of the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, tasked with calibrating deep space sensors. He was supposed to be listening for the background radiation of the Big Bang, the faint echo of creation. Instead, in the autumn of 1972, he found something that did not belong. A whisper. It was a signal so faint, it was almost indistinguishable from the background noise of the universe. But it had one defining characteristic. It repeated, not like a pulsar, a celestial metronome. This was a complex, non-repeating pattern that only cycled back to its beginning every 79 hours. Narrator. Finch spent months trying to convince his superiors. He was dismissed. The signal was classified as a possible Soviet reconnaissance satellite using an unknown encryption method, or a complex solar reflection. It was an anomaly to be logged and ignored. but Finch couldn't ignore it. In his private logs, he described it as a voice speaking a language of pure mathematics. He saw prime number sequences, geometric progressions, and what he believed were star charts of constellations viewed from an impossible, extrasolar perspective. He was a man possessed, working in secret after hours, using processing power he wasn't authorized for. He was trying to translate a message no one else believed existed. The fragments he managed to decode were nonsensical on their own. Convergence 0. Imminent phase shift. Silence the echo. They were words of warning, but without context. They were just poetry from the static. The true tragedy, documented in the margins of Echo7 Zulu, is that Finch was getting close. He had begun to suspect the signal wasn't a hail from a distant star, but a warning from somewhere much, much closer. He theorized it was a tripwire, an ancient automated system designed to alert something to a specific set of conditions. And those conditions were now being met. His final frantic memo to his director, included as an appendix in the file, ends with a single, chilling sentence. It's not a message, it's an alarm bell, and it's been ringing for months. The memo was dated 24 hours before all contact was lost with Outpost K12. Narrator. Some places are designed to be forgotten. Outpost Kilo 12 was one of them. Buried beneath the Greenland ice sheet, it was officially a geological survey station. In reality, it was a highly advanced signals intelligence facility, a steel and concrete ear pressed against the cold heart of the world. Its existence was a secret known to less than 100 people. Its crew of 8 technicians and scientists were ghosts, serving 2-year terms in total isolation. Their world was the hum of servers, the biting cold, and the endless, crushing white of the ice. Narrator. Echo7 Zulu contains the station's final communication logs. The first entries are painfully mundane. Power fluctuations, malfunctioning heating coils, complaints about the coffee. But then, 72 hours before the end, the tone changes. The station's lead seismologist reports tremors that don't match any known tectonic activity. He describes them in his log as feeling organized, like a heavy machine moving deep in the bedrock. The communications officer notes severe magnetic interference, causing vivid, silent auroras to dance in the sky at midday. They report their sensitive microphones picking up a low-frequency, resonant hum coming not from the sky, but from directly beneath their feet. They were the ones tasked with recording Finch's signal, but they were also sitting directly on top of the story's terrifying conclusion. The final entry is a voice recording. The quality is poor, filled with static and panic. It's from the station commander. It's not snow. The ice it's glowing. God, it's coming from below. We are not alone here. The transmission doesn't end with static. It ends with a sudden perfect silence, an abrupt cut as if a wire was snipped. The next page in Echo7 Zulu is a single satellite photograph taken the following day. Where the multi-level subterranean structure of Outpost K12 should have been, there is only a 2-mile-wide circle of impossibly smooth, dark, glassy ice. There was no debris, no crater, no sign of a struggle. It was a surgical removal. The station and the 8 souls inside had simply been erased. Narrator. For years, the event at Outpost K12 was classified as an unexplained catastrophic structural failure, a tragic accident. Echo7 Zulu was the truth, locked away and buried. But the signal Dr. Finch had discovered didn't stop. It continued its 79-hour loop, a ghost whispering into the void. A clandestine program, the successor to the project that oversaw K12, spent the next 2 decades and billions of dollars trying to fully decode the message, terrified of another accident. What they found rewrites our understanding of the world itself. The final decoded translation is the centerpiece of the Echo7 Zulu file. The signal was not extraterrestrial. It originated from a source deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, the opposite pole. It was a pre-human, automated system, a sentinel. And the message was not for us. It was a status report, broadcast to an unknown recipient. A status report that had changed for the first time in millennia. The message, pieced together from Finch's work in the new program, was a warning. It spoke of dormant observers and a breach of solitude protocol. The intense, focused listening from Outpost K12, a concentrated beam of energy directed at the sky, had inadvertently reflected off the ionosphere and focused on a specific point deep in the Arctic. We had, in our clumsy search for aliens, accidentally shined a flashlight into the eyes of something that had been sleeping in our own basement. Narrator: the Watchers, as the file speculates, were not hostile. They were simply present, ancient, and they demanded quiet. The destruction of Outpost K12 wasn't an attack, it was pest control. It was the universe swatting a fly. The message Finch intercepted wasn't a warning for humanity to escape. It was a notification that a boundary had been crossed, and that the consequences were automated, swift, and absolute. The message didn't arrive too late for the men at K12 because of slow translation. It arrived too late because the moment they were heard, their fate was already sealed. The final page of Echo7 Zulu is a directive issued in 1994 and still in effect today. All deep Earth and deep space signal projects are to avoid specific frequencies. All polar research is to be kept superficial. Do not dig, do not broadcast, do not listen too closely. The file is a confession. We are not the masters of this planet. We are tenants in a house we don't understand, and our landlords are stirring. The file is closed, but the question it opens remains. What else is sleeping beneath the ice, waiting for us to make another sound? Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some messages are not meant to be received, only to be found. Narrator: in the vast, silent theater of the Cold War, the world was listening. Deep beneath the earth, in concrete bunkers shielded from nuclear eyes, and across desolate landscapes dotted with skeletal antennas, an army of analysts strained to hear whispers in the ether. They hunted for submarine pings, coded transmissions, the subtle electronic breath of their enemies. But in the winter of 1967, at a remote listening post in the Alaskan wilderness designated only as Station Echo7, a small team of technicians began to hear something else. It wasn't Russian, it wasn't Chinese, and it certainly wasn't American. It was a ghost, a signal buried so deep in the background static, it was more of a feeling than a sound. Archive Document 77B, a logbook entry from Technician First Class Eris Thorne, declassified in 1998, describes it with a chilling simplicity. 2340 Zulu, familiar hiss on the 40-meter band, but something behind it. A pulse, irregular, like a failing heart. For weeks, this was all they had. A faint, arrhythmic pulse that defied all known forms of transmission. It had no carrier wave, no discernible modulation. It simply was. It appeared for a few minutes, sometimes an hour, then vanished for days. The team at Echo7, led by civilian cryptographer Dr. Evelyn Reed, became obsessed. They rerouted processing power from their primary directives, risking reprimand, to isolate and amplify the phantom signal. They called it the Whistler, because on the rare occasions they could clean the audio enough, the pulse was followed by a low, mournful, sweeping tone, like wind through a forgotten ruin. The sound was deeply unsettling. It violated the clean, mathematical language of radio waves. It felt ancient, organic. Official reports sent back to command were systematically ignored or dismissed. Memos from the Pentagon, heavily redacted but partially legible, cite tropospheric scattering or magnetospheric reverberation. In other words, weather, noise, nothing to see here. But Dr. Reed and her team knew better. They saw the structure. The pulse wasn't random. It was a complex sequence, but one based on a mathematical logic they couldn't comprehend. It was like finding a book written in a language that had no alphabet, no grammar you could recognize, yet you knew instinctively that it was a language. Every attempt at decryption failed. Their supercomputers, marvels of their time, churned out nothing but gibberish. The signal was a lock, and they didn't even know the shape of the key. As 1967 bled into 1968, the signal began to change. The pulses grew marginally stronger, the rhythm less erratic, more insistent. It was as if the entity on the other end was learning, adapting, or perhaps growing more desperate. They were on the precipice of a revelation, convinced they were the sole audience to a transmission of monumental importance. They couldn't have known that they weren't just listening to a signal. They were listening to a countdown. Narrator: history remembers 1968 as a year of fire and fury, a year of assassinations, protests, and a world tearing at the seams. But in the classified annexes of naval intelligence, it is remembered for something else. It is remembered as the year the sea went silent. On March 11, 1968, the USS Scorpion, a skipjack-class nuclear submarine, vanished without a trace in the Atlantic. The official story to this day is a tragic but explainable accident, a battery explosion, a torpedo malfunction, a neat, tidy answer for a messy, terrifying question. But in the archives, a different story emerges, one that connects the fate of the 99 men aboard the Scorpion to the strange, whistling signal being monitored thousands of miles away at Station Echo7. In the 72 hours leading up to the submarine's disappearance, the Whistler transformed. Dr. Evelyn Reed's logs, which she secretly duplicated before they were confiscated, paint an alarming picture. The signal's intermittent pulses locked into a frantic, steady rhythm. The mournful whistle sharpened into something that sounded, according to one technician, like screaming machinery. It was no longer a whisper in the static. It was a roar. The team at Echo7 worked without sleep, convinced they were about to witness a breakthrough. They believed the signal was a prelude to a first contact event, a grand cosmic overture. They sent frantic, encrypted telexes to their superiors, warning that something unprecedented was happening. Their messages went unanswered. At a 1:04 Zulu on March 11th, the estimated time of the Scorpion's loss, the signal peaked. For precisely 99 seconds, it broadcast a single, piercing, unwavering tone, so powerful it overloaded the station's primary amplifiers. Then silence. Not the usual hiss of static, but a profound, unnatural void on the frequency. It was as if a hole had been punched in the fabric of the radio spectrum. When the static finally returned hours later, the Whistler was gone. It had vanished as completely as the submarine. The official investigation into the loss of the USS Scorpion was a masterclass in misdirection. Debris fields were mysteriously hard to locate. Acoustic data from underwater listening posts was declared inconclusive or corrupted. The Navy concluded its investigation, sealed the report, and the world moved on. But what the public never saw were the secondary reports, the anomalous data that was buried deep in the archives. Unexplained magnetic disturbances recorded by geological survey planes. Sonar logs from other vessels in the region that picked up non-human high-frequency acoustics just before the incident. This was the anomaly of 1968. Not just the loss of a submarine, but the coordinated, systematic erasure of the true circumstances surrounding it. The message had been sent. A terrible, violent message, and the team at Echo7 had the horrible realization that they hadn't been listening to a greeting, but to a eulogy being delivered before the death had even occurred. Narrator: in the wake of the anomaly, a new kind of silence descended. Not the eerie quiet of a dead frequency, but the cold, deliberate silence of bureaucracy. The cover-up began almost immediately. Within a week of the Scorpion's disappearance, Station Echo7 was decommissioned. The official reason given was budgetary restructuring and strategic consolidation. The truth was far simpler. It was a burial. The team, once at the forefront of a potential paradigm shift in human history, was scattered to the winds. Dr. Evelyn Reed was reassigned to a basement office at the Pentagon, tasked with translating mundane Soviet agricultural reports until her early retirement due to nervous exhaustion. Technician Eris Thorne, whose hand wrote the first log of the signal, was transferred to a weather monitoring station in Antarctica and was later reported lost during a blizzard. His body was never recovered. The others simply vanished from the records. Their service files end abruptly, their futures a blank page. The Obsidian Archive holds fragments of what happened, contained in a file designated Project Nightfall. It is a thin folder, mostly filled with pages that are more black ink than text. Let me read you an excerpt from the order to decommission Echo7. All audio logs, magnetic tapes, and spectrographic analyses pertaining to anomalous signal designation are to be collected by agents of and remanded to their custody for deep storage. All personnel associated with the initial detection and analysis are subject to the National Security Act of 1947, Article Thys, and are forbidden from discussing any aspect of their work under penalty of treason. This document is not about preserving national security. It is about enforcing collective amnesia. It is the meticulous process of turning people into ghosts and events into rumors. We see it again in the debriefing transcripts. The few that exist are almost comical in their redactions. An interview with a sonar operator from a destroyer near the Scorpion's last known position reads, Question: Did you hear anything unusual? Answer: Yes. It was like. Question: Can you describe? Answer: It didn't sound like a sub breaking up. It sounded like... We are left to fill in the blanks with our own fears. What sound could be so terrifying, so paradigm-shifting, that the state would choose to erase it from history? The names of the 99 sailors on the USS Scorpion are etched on a memorial, but the names of the men and women at Echo7 exist only in the margins of censored documents. They are the secondary victims of the anomaly, silenced not by a catastrophic event, but by the cold, heavy weight of a secret deemed too dangerous to remember. They were the first to hear the message, and for their trouble, Their own histories were redacted, their names erased, their voices forever lost in the official static of the past. Narrator. For over 50 years, the official story held. The anomaly of 1968 remained a footnote in naval history, and the story of Station Echo7 was a ghost story, whispered only by conspiracy theorists. But one member of the team did not vanish. He did not die in a convenient accident or retire into obscurity. He hid. He changed his name, moved from city to city, and lived a life of quiet paranoia, waiting for the past to find him. Last year, we were contacted through a series of encrypted channels. After months of verification, we sat down with the last surviving member of the Echo7 decryption team. For his safety, we will call him Daniel. Daniel, you think we were trying to hear a message, a warning, that we missed it? That if we had only been faster, smarter, we could have saved those men. That's the story I told myself for 50 years. It's the story that lets you sleep at night. But it's a lie. We were never meant to stop it. We were only meant to bear witness. Narrator. Daniel was the lead programmer for Dr. Reed, the man who wrote the algorithms trying to crack the signal. In the chaotic hours after the signal disappeared, long after the station was ordered to stand down, he ran one last decryption sequence. It was a desperate, shot-in-the-dark attempt, using a theoretical model of non-linear mathematics that Reed had been working on. Daniel, the computers were supposed to be wiped, the tapes boxed up. But I kept one. Just a 5-minute loop from the signal's peak. I ran it through Evelyn's final algorithm. I didn't expect anything, but then something came back. Not a long message, not a conversation, just 2 words. That's all it was. 2 words, repeated over and over again in that screaming tone. Narrator. What were those words, Daniel? Daniel. Phase complete. It wasn't a distress call from the submarine. It wasn't a warning from some benevolent alien race. It was a confirmation, a sign-off. Like a contractor telling his boss the demolition is done. The USS Scorpion wasn't an accident. It was a target. And the signal was the weapon, or the communication from the weapon. We had spent months trying to understand a message that arrived too late. Not because we were slow, but because its purpose was only to be understood after the event. It was a declaration. Narrator. A declaration of what? Daniel. That they were here. That they could touch us whenever they wanted, wherever they wanted. And we would be powerless to stop it. The cover-up wasn't to hide a military failure. It was to hide our utter irrelevance. To hide the fact that we are not alone, and our neighbors are not friendly. People think the signal is gone. It's not. It's just quiet. I can still feel it sometimes, in the static between radio stations, in the hum of the power lines. It's listening, waiting to send its next message. And you can be sure that one will also arrive too late. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Narrator. While the world was reeling from the initial, fragmented evidence of the signal, what we've come to call the message, another far more clandestine operation was already in motion. Deep within the labyrinthine archives of national security, buried under layers of classification, lies a program so secret, its very name was a misdirection. Project Chimera. Officially, its mandate was atmospheric research, a study of deep space radio interference, a budget line item lost among thousands. utterly unremarkable. But its true purpose was something else entirely. Chimera wasn't about listening to the noise of the cosmos. It was about trying to understand its grammar. Declassified memos, almost entirely blacked out, reveal a startling objective: to establish a protocol for the interpretation of non-terrestrial, patterned, asynchronous communication. They weren't just listening for a message. They were operating under the assumption that one had already been sent, and that we, as a species, had fundamentally misunderstood it. The project was headquartered not in a gleaming research facility, but in a repurposed Cold War-era listening post, designated Site Gamma, carved into a desolate mountain range. Archival photographs show a place built for isolation and secrecy. The personnel were not just astrophysicists and cryptographers. They were linguists specializing in dead languages, neuroscientists studying pattern recognition in the human brain, even historians of mythology. They were tasked with solving a puzzle without knowing its shape or its pieces. Leaked testimony from a low-level technician, given decades later under heavy anonymity, describes the atmosphere inside Site Gamma as a library for ghosts. He spoke of endless nights spent analyzing static, of algorithms that would churn for weeks, only to produce terrifying geometric patterns that seemed to shift and evolve. The project lead, a Dr. Eris Thorne, was a recluse, a brilliant but haunted figure who believed the signal wasn't a broadcast, but an echo, a recording. In a heavily redacted personal log, he writes, "We are not the intended recipients. We are like archaeologists who have found a phonograph record millennia after the civilization that created it has turned to dust. The tragedy is not that the message is in an alien language, but that it arrived too late." Project Chimera wasn't a first contact initiative. It was a post-mortem. Narrator: if Project Chimera was the official, albeit secret, attempt to decipher the message, its existence was unknowingly validated by a series of strange, disconnected events spanning the globe. These are the corroborating echoes, faint signals from the periphery, ignored by the mainstream, but which, when viewed together, form a disturbing harmony. Consider the case of the Volgograd incident in 1983. A Soviet skywatcher, a ham radio operator named Alexei Ivanov, recorded a peculiar sequence of pulsing static during a meteor shower. Dismissed as ionospheric distortion, his cassette tapes were stored in a state archive. Decades later, when the tapes were digitized, audio forensics experts discovered a structured, repeating mathematical sequence hidden beneath the noise. A sequence identical to one of the core patterns identified by Project Chimera's algorithms. Then there is the oral tradition of the Ainu people of northern Japan, which speaks of a star hum, a low-frequency sound from the sky that precedes great misfortune. Their elders describe it not as a sound to be heard, but a vibration to be felt in the bones, a message from a dead god. Anthropologists had long dismissed it as folklore, but when seismic data from the region was cross-referenced with Chimera's temporal logs, a correlation emerged. The reported star hums coincided with moments the signal was at its most intense. The most compelling echo comes from the deep sea. In 1997, the research vessel Okeanos was mapping the Mariana Trench when its hydrophones picked up an anomalous, low-frequency sound. It was biological in its complexity, but mechanical in its precision. They named it the pulse. For years, it was a celebrated oceanic mystery. It was only when a former Chimera cryptographer, saw the sound's spectrogram in a scientific journal that the connection was made. The pulse's structure was a perfect acoustic representation of the radio signal. The message wasn't just in the sky, it was in the water. It was in our myths. These were not isolated incidents. They were fragments of the same broken mirror, each reflecting a tiny piece of a terrifyingly large picture. It suggests the message wasn't a single event, but a pervasive, environmental phenomenon that our civilization was simply not equipped to perceive until it was far too late. Narrator. As these echoes began to coalesce, and as whispers of Project Chimera started to leak from the shadowed corners of the intelligence community, the official narrative began to solidify. It was swift, comprehensive, and absolute. The denial. It came in many forms. First, the scientific papers, published in prestigious journals by government-funded academics. They methodically debunked each piece of evidence. The Volgograd recording was reanalyzed and attributed to a previously unknown interaction between solar flares and Soviet-era radar technology. The Ainu star hum was explained away as a rare form of infrasound generated by tectonic microtremors, common to the region. The pulse from the Mariana Trench was officially reclassified as the sound of a distant, calving ice shelf, its acoustic properties distorted by abyssal pressure. Each explanation was plausible, meticulously researched, and scientifically sound on its own. Together they formed a wall of academic certainty. Next came the media. A series of high-profile articles and television segments appeared, ridiculing the notion of a phantom signal as modern folklore, a conspiracy theory for the digital age. Insiders who tried to speak out were discredited. Alexei Ivanov was painted as a lonely eccentric. The Okeanos scientists were pressured to retract their initial, more speculative findings. The message was clear. This topic was not for serious consideration. But behind this public facade of dismissal, a different story was unfolding. Freedom of Information Act requests have unearthed internal communications from the very agencies issuing these denials. One heavily redacted email from a senior Pentagon official reads, "Containment of the narrative is paramount. The civilian psychological impact of the alternative is unacceptable." Another memo discusses the formation of a cognitive security task force whose purpose was to actively manage public perception regarding anomalous astrophysical phenomena. They weren't just denying a story. They were engaged in an active campaign of information warfare. The most chilling document is a single, almost entirely blacked-out page, believed to be the final directive concerning Project Chimera. Only a few words are legible. Mandate complete. Archive deep. Consensus is silence. The official denial wasn't a statement of fact. It was an order. It was the frantic, desperate act of an establishment that had received a message it could not comprehend and certainly could not control. Narrator. When you strip away the official denials and look past the individual, isolated echoes, you can begin to see the architecture of the mystery. You can begin to trace the patterns beneath the noise. The first pattern is temporal. When the data from Project Chimera, the Volgograd incident, the Ainu tradition, and dozens of other smaller events are plotted on a single timeline, a rhythm emerges. The signal's intensity peaks not randomly, but in precise, predictable intervals, following a complex mathematical progression related to prime numbers. It's a celestial clock, ticking to a logic we don't understand. It suggests that the arrival of the message wasn't a single moment in time, but a long, slow process of unfolding. A process that may have begun centuries before we even built our first radio telescope. The second pattern is geographical. The phenomena are not randomly distributed across the globe. They fall along specific geographic lines, known as ley lines to mystics, but in this context they appear to be lines of planetary magnetic resonance. Site Gamma, the location of the Volgograd recording, the Ainu homeland. They all sit on or near these powerful geomagnetic conduits. It's as if the Earth itself is an antenna, and these locations are the points of clearest reception. The message wasn't just broadcast through space, it was integrated into the very fabric of our planet, waiting for a species sensitive enough to detect it. The final and most disturbing pattern is informational. The fragments of code extracted by Chimera, the mathematical sequence in the Soviet recording, the geometric shapes seen in the deep-sea spectrogram, they are all variations of the same core structure. It's a complex, multi-layered language that appears to describe not physics or chemistry, but biology. Specifically, the catastrophic failure of a biological system. Dr. Eris Thorne, in his last known entry before his disappearance, theorized that the message wasn't a warning of a future danger. It was an autopsy report, a detailed, dispassionate account of an extinction event, broadcast by its last survivors. The patterns reveal a terrifying possibility. The message is not a greeting, nor is it a threat. It is a memorial, a tombstone floating in the cosmic static, telling a story of a civilization that solved the universe's greatest mysteries, all except the one that mattered. And the reason it arrived too late is because it was never meant for us. It was a final, desperate archive, a ghost whispering its regrets into the void. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some messages are not meant for the living. When the Arecibo Observatory's ultra-sensitive receivers first registered the anomalous signal on a cold November night in 1974, it was initially dismissed as noise, a glitch in the system, a passing military satellite, or perhaps a previously unknown pulsar. But the noise was different. It was structured. It carried the unmistakable signature of complexity, a series of prime numbers embedded within a repeating carrier wave that defied any known natural explanation. This wasn't the chaotic symphony of the cosmos. It was a whisper of intention from the void. The debate that erupted within the clandestine corridors of Project Chimera was immediate and ferocious. On one side stood the purists, the astrophysicists, who argued for a natural origin. They proposed elaborate, almost fantastical theories of rotating neutron stars with impossibly complex magnetic fields, or gravitational lensing phenomena that could, in theory, organize background radiation into pseudo-intelligent patterns. They built models, ran simulations, and pointed to the sheer improbability of alien contact. To them, the universe was a place of magnificent, unthinking clockwork. To suggest otherwise was to abandon science for science fiction. But on the other side were the cryptographers, the information theorists, and a handful of rogue astronomers who saw not celestial mechanics, but intelligent design. They pointed out that the signal's modulation contained a level of irreducible complexity. It was layered, carrying what appeared to be a nested data structure, almost like a compressed file sent across the abyss. They argued that invoking an unknown, hyper-complex natural phenomenon to explain the signal was a far greater leap of faith than accepting the simpler, albeit more terrifying, explanation. Someone, or something, had engineered it. The message had been sent. The core of their argument rested on the fact that the signal arrived too late. Its origin was traced to a star system so distant that the light and the message had been traveling for over 50,000 years. The civilization that sent it was, by any conceivable measure, long dead. This wasn't a greeting. It was a time capsule, a post-mortem. This fact colored the entire debate. If it was a natural phenomenon, it was a fascinating but ultimately meaningless cosmic quirk. But if it was a message, it was an epitaph, a final desperate transmission from a ghost civilization, a warning or a eulogy that had traversed the stars only to find its intended recipients were not yet evolved enough to even build a radio. The internal documents, heavily redacted, show the schism. Lines of equations are blacked out. Entire pages detailing the signal's content are marked classified, eyes only. What we can piece together is a desperate search for an answer that would not shatter their understanding of humanity's place in the universe. They were looking for an explanation that would allow them to sleep at night, an explanation that didn't involve staring into the darkness and knowing that we had received a message from the dead. The instruments that caught this cosmic ghost story were marvels of their time. Colossal dishes, like the iconic 305-meter giant at Arecibo, or the sprawling Very Large Array in New Mexico, were our ears to the universe. They were built with a sense of optimism, a belief that we were on the verge of a grand cosmic dialogue. Instead, they became silent tombs of a dead secret. After the 1974 signal, these listening posts were subtly, almost imperceptibly, repurposed. Officially, their funding was reallocated to deep space imaging and pulsar mapping. But declassified memos reveal a different story. Project Chimera commandeered a significant portion of their operational time, turning these scientific instruments into tools of a paranoid vigil. They were no longer searching. They were listening for an echo that would never come. These great dishes, once symbols of our outward reach, became passive sentinels guarding a terrible truth. They were the silent witnesses to the message that arrived too late. The men and women who worked there became unwitting participants in the cover-up. They ran diagnostics, calibrated receivers, and pointed the dishes to coordinates dictated by a faceless authority in Washington. They collected terabytes of data, which were immediately whisked away by military couriers for analysis at secure facilities. They were told it was for national security, for tracking Soviet spy satellites or monitoring solar flare activity. But the veterans of these stations tell stories in hushed tones. Stories of strange protocols, of periods where the entire facility would go into lockdown for no apparent reason, of men in dark suits who were not scientists observing their work with cold, analytical eyes. Over the years, these magnificent structures began to fall into disrepair. Arecibo, which received the initial signal, suffered a catastrophic collapse in 2020. Other arrays were decommissioned, their giant dishes left to rust, pointing at the sky like the skeletal remains of forgotten gods. The official narrative is one of budget cuts and aging infrastructure. But for those who study the history of Project Chimera, this decay feels deliberate. It's a systematic dismantling of the very tools that could ever confirm the signal's existence. You can't hear a message from the void if you have no ears left to listen. Today, you can visit some of these sites. They are eerie, silent places. The wind whistles through the rusting latticework of the dishes, The control rooms are frozen in time, with obsolete computers and dust-covered logbooks. Standing in the shadow of these fallen giants, you feel a profound sense of loss. It's the loss of not just a scientific instrument, but of a future we thought we had. These were our embassies to the stars, and now they are monuments to a conversation that ended before it ever began. Guardians of a message that serves as a permanent, silent reminder of our cosmic solitude. A secret of this magnitude is not a piece of information. It is a living entity. It infects, it corrodes, it consumes. For the handful of scientists, cryptographers, and intelligence analysts inside Project Chimera, the 1974 signal was a psychological poison. They were the first humans to know, with near certainty, that we were not alone. And they were also the first to know that we were, for all intents and purposes, still alone. This paradox became an unbearable burden. Imagine being the gatekeeper of the most profound discovery in human history, but being forbidden from ever speaking its name. Imagine carrying the knowledge of a dead alien civilization in your mind every single day. The weight of this secret crushed them. Archive records, though heavily censored, hint at the immense psychological toll. We see a spike in requests for psychiatric evaluation among project personnel. We see transfers to non-critical posts, early retirements citing nervous exhaustion, and in at least 2 documented cases, suicides. One analyst, Dr. Alistair Finch, was found in his study, surrounded by pages of calculations and frantic notes about the signal's content. His official cause of death was a heart attack, but his personal journal, later confiscated, allegedly contained the repeated phrase, "Their silence is louder than our sun." This was more than just the stress of keeping a government secret. It was a unique form of existential despair, a cosmic grief for a people they had never met. They were mourning a ghost. The signal's content, which remains the most classified aspect of the entire event, was the source of this despair. Leaks suggest it wasn't a simple hello. It was complex, containing what some interpreted as biological data, star charts, and mathematical principles far beyond our own. But the overwhelming tone was one of finality. It was a meticulously crafted archive, a digital gravestone. The team was tasked with deciphering an epitaph. They were forced to confront the reality of civilizational mortality on a scale no human had ever contemplated. They saw in the message's late arrival a potential future for humanity. A brilliant, explosive existence that ultimately ends in silence, with our own final message hurtling through the void, destined to arrive at a barren world or one not yet ready to listen. This knowledge bred a unique paranoia. Team members became isolated, suspicious of one another, and terrified of the outside world. How could you go back to worrying about mortgages and politics when you knew that entire galaxies could be graveyards? The secret created a chasm between them and the rest of humanity. They were living in a different reality, haunted by the echo of a voice that had taken 50,000 years to reach them, only to tell them that they were too late. After the initial shock and the frantic secret analysis, a new phase began for Project Chimera: the wait. The first message was a time capsule, an epitaph. But was it the only one? Had the sender, in their final moments, cast more than one message into the cosmic ocean? This question gave birth to a fragile, desperate hope within the project. Perhaps the first signal was just a primer, an introduction, perhaps a second transmission, with more data, with the key to understanding everything, was following close behind. For years, the silent transmitters remained pointed at that same empty patch of sky. A new generation of analysts was brought in, sworn to the same suffocating secrecy, their entire careers dedicated to listening for a ghost's second whisper. They developed algorithms to sift through cosmic noise with unprecedented precision, searching for a pattern, a hint of the structure they had seen in 1974. Every solar flare, every pulsar burst, every passing satellite created a spike of adrenaline that quickly faded into disappointment. The logbooks from this era are a testament to this agonizing vigil. Entries begin with clinical precision, but devolve into expressions of frustration and existential dread. Day 1, Thar 422, negative, background radiation consistent with stellar drift. Day 300810, negative, another false positive from a magnetar. Hope is a dwindling resource. Day 5047, negative. Are we listening for an echo or our own madness? The silence was absolute. The lack of a second signal was, in its own way, more terrifying than the first. It confirmed the finality of the message. It cemented the truth that this was not a dialogue. There was no one left on the other end to talk to. This realization led to the project's final, most controversial phase: the reply. A faction within Chimera argued that even if the senders were gone, we had a moral obligation to respond. To acknowledge the receipt of their final testament, to let the universe know that their 50,000-year-old message had not been in vain. Others argued it was a catastrophic risk. Transmitting a powerful targeted signal would be like lighting a flare in a dark, unknown forest. We had received a message from the dead. We couldn't be sure the living wouldn't also be listening. The debate raged for years, but ultimately, the decision was made. In 1999, using a deep space communications array in the Australian outback, a reply was sent. We don't know what it said. But we do know that after it was sent, Project Chimera was officially disbanded. The files were buried, the personnel reassigned, the transmitters left to rust. The official story is that the search for extraterrestrial intelligence had yielded nothing. But the truth is, it had yielded everything and nothing. It gave us the knowledge that the universe had once been alive with intelligence like our own, and then it plunged us back into a silence more profound than before. We are now the ones waiting, wondering if our own message will ever be received, or if it too is destined to arrive too late. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some truths are not buried. They are merely waiting for the right frequency to be heard. Narrator. In the grand theater of history, the most pivotal moments are not always the loud declarations of war or the public signing of treaties. They are often whispers. A single piece of intelligence, a coded phrase, a dispatch carried by a ghost across a hostile border. Information is the true currency of power, and its timely delivery can mean the difference between peace and annihilation, prosperity and ruin. Welcome back to the Obsidian Archive. Tonight we unseal the file on a message that held the weight of the world, a message whose delay would cascade into a catastrophe that history has struggled to explain. The year is 1973. The world is a chessboard of Cold War paranoia. Two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, are locked in a silent, deadly dance of espionage. But beneath this global standoff, another war is being waged, an economic one. The Bretton Woods system, the very architecture of post-war global finance, is fracturing. The United States has abandoned the gold standard, and the world's currencies are floating in a sea of uncertainty. Oil, the lifeblood of industrial nations, is about to be weaponized. In the corridors of power in Washington, London, and Moscow, analysts see the storm clouds gathering. But one analyst, a man whose name has been redacted from every official record, we will call him Cassandra, sees the precise shape of the hurricane. He has access to back-channel communications, financial intelligence, and human sources deep within the newly formed Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries. He pieces together a mosaic of information that points to a single, terrifying conclusion. A coordinated oil embargo is not just possible, but imminent. The plan is audacious, and its consequences catastrophic. It would trigger a global recession, cripple Western economies, and shift the balance of geopolitical power for a generation. Cassandra drafts a detailed report, a 12-page telex message to be sent via a secure diplomatic channel to the highest levels of the State Department. This wasn't a vague prediction. It was a blueprint of the coming crisis. It named the key players, the exact date the taps would be turned off, and the political demands that would accompany the act. It was the ultimate geopolitical spoiler. This message, designated Crimson November, was more than a warning. It was a key. A key that could have been used to initiate preemptive diplomacy, secure alternative energy sources, and brace the global markets. It could have averted the 1973 oil crisis entirely. But for a key to work, it must be placed in the lock. And as Cassandra transmitted his message into the ether, he had no idea that a silent, invisible hand was already moving to ensure that the lock would remain shut. Narrator. A message containing a world-altering secret is a fragile thing. It is not enough for it to be sent. It must also be received, understood, and acted upon. The journey of the Crimson November dispatch was fraught with unseen obstacles, a gauntlet of bureaucratic inertia and deliberate, targeted interference. This was not a simple case of a lost memo. This was the result of a sophisticated architecture of suppression designed to deafen the very people who needed to hear the alarm. The first layer of this architecture was electronic. In the 1970s, secure communications were a complex web of telex networks and radio transmissions. Intelligence agencies on all sides had become masters of signals intelligence, or SIGINT. It is highly probable that the Crimson November transmission was intercepted the moment it was sent. Listening posts, like the ones at Menwith Hill in the UK or Lords in Cuba, were electronic ears pressed against the world's conversations. An analyst in a windowless room, sifting through mountains of intercepted traffic, would have seen the message's keywords flag it for immediate review. But who was this analyst working for? The Cold War was a hall of mirrors, with allegiances constantly shifting. Industrial and financial espionage were as rampant as political spying. Powerful multinational corporations and financial institutions had their own intelligence networks, rivaling those of some nations. They stood to make fortunes from the chaos of a global energy crisis. For them, Cassandra's warning wasn't a threat to be averted, but a stock tip to be exploited. The second layer was human. Within any large intelligence or diplomatic body, there are gatekeepers, rivals, and moles. The State Department, like the CIA and MI6, was a labyrinth of competing desks and personal ambitions. Cassandra's message, arriving from a semi-autonomous source, would have been seen as a threat by some, An analyst who predicts a crisis that his superiors have missed is not always rewarded. Often, he is punished. His report could have been deliberately buried under a mountain of less urgent paperwork, its priority level downgraded by a jealous rival, or worse. The most insidious part of this architecture is the possibility of a mole, a double agent placed specifically to control the flow of information. This agent's job would not be to steal secrets, but to stop them, to identify critical intelligence like Crimson November and ensure it never reached its intended recipient. This agent would be the ghost in the machine, the saboteur posing as a patriot, and his only trace would be the things that didn't happen, the meetings that were never called, the warnings that were never issued. This architecture of suppression is designed to fail silently. There is no evidence of a crime, only an outcome. The telex is stamped "Received," but it sits in a forgotten inbox. The file is logged but never opened. The world continues to spin towards the abyss, completely unaware that the map of the cliff's edge is gathering dust in a locked drawer, a victim of a system built to create plausible deniability. Narrator. Silence. In the world of intelligence, silence can be the most terrifying sound. For Cassandra, the days following the transmission of Crimson November were a torment of unanswered quiet. He had lit the beacon, but no one seemed to see the fire. He had screamed a warning into a void, and the only response was the echo of his own voice. Then, on October 6, 1973, the world fractured. On the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur, a coalition of Arab states led by Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on Israel. The Yom Kippur War had begun. The conflict was the trigger. In response to the United States' support for Israel, the Arab members of OPEC, just as Cassandra had predicted, unleashed their economic weapon. On October 17th, they declared an oil embargo against the United States and other allied nations. The taps were turned off. The world Cassandra had warned of was now a brutal reality. The fallout was immediate and devastating. The price of oil quadrupled overnight. In the United States, the effect was visceral. Endless lines of cars snaked for miles from gas stations. Fuel rationing was imposed. The hum of the American economy, powered by cheap and abundant energy, sputtered and died. The 1973-75 recession, one of the worst economic downturns in modern history, had begun. Stock markets crashed, industries ground to a halt. The crisis exposed the deep vulnerability of the Western world. But the true tragedy was not the economic chaos. It was the knowledge that it was all preventable. While the public was being told the crisis was an unforeseeable geopolitical shock, the Crimson November file sat dormant. The unanswered warning became a ghost that haunted the empty halls of power. We can only imagine the scenes inside the State Department and the White House as the disaster unfolded. The frantic search for intelligence, the desperate scramble to understand what was happening. Did anyone in that chaos remember Cassandra's telex? Did a low-level clerk recall seeing a report with those keywords? Or was the suppression so complete that it had been wiped from institutional memory? The historical record is a carefully curated story, and the official narrative of the 1973 oil crisis is one of strategic surprise. But the existence of an unanswered warning suggests a different, more disturbing story. It speaks of a catastrophic failure, not of intelligence gathering, but of intelligence listening. The world wasn't blind, it was deaf. The warning wasn't absent, it was ignored. And as millions of people suffered the consequences, as the global balance of power was redrawn, the truth of its forewarning remained a silent, damning indictment of the very system designed to protect it. Narrator. Decades pass. The Cold War ends. The 1973 oil crisis becomes a chapter in history textbooks, a case study for economists and political scientists. The world moves on, building new systems on the foundations of old failures. Then, in a dusty corner of a declassified archive, a researcher finds a misfiled folder. The brittle, yellowed pages within are stamped with the designation Crimson November. The message has finally arrived. The late arrival of Cassandra's warning does more than just fill a gap in the historical record. It forces us to re-examine the entire event. It's no longer a story of an unavoidable shock, but a preventable tragedy. It posthumously condemns the gatekeepers who buried it and exonerates the lone voice who tried to avert it. But what is the value of a warning that arrives 50 years too late? Its message is no longer about the specifics of oil embargoes or Middle Eastern politics. Its true message is timeless. It is a stark reminder of the profound danger of institutional arrogance, the belief that what is known within the halls of power is all that is worth knowing. It's a testament to the courage of whistleblowers and the Cassandras of the world who speak truth to power, even when power refuses to listen. In our modern age, the parallels are chilling. We are inundated with information, a constant digital flood of data, predictions, and warnings. We face existential threats, climate change, pandemics, sophisticated disinformation campaigns that are well documented and forecasted by experts. Yet, just like in 1973, there exists an architecture of suppression. It's no longer just a government mole or a jealous bureaucrat. Today, it's a complex ecosystem of social media algorithms that prioritize engagement over truth, political polarization that dismisses facts as partisan attacks, and a media landscape that often values sensationalism over substance. The warnings are all around us, but are we listening? Are we capable of distinguishing the signal of a modern-day Cassandra from the overwhelming noise? The Crimson November message, discovered so long after the fact, is not just a relic of the past. It is a message for today. It tells us that truth can be suppressed, but it often survives. It reminds us that the official narrative is rarely the complete story. It urges us to question, to dig deeper, and to listen for the quiet warnings that are so often drowned out by the roar of the present. The message arrived too late to save the world of 1973. The question we must ask ourselves is, will we receive the critical messages of our own time before they too become tragic footnotes in the Obsidian Archive of history?